Gravy, baby.
You just get excited, Drew. Okay.
I know.
We get
I know.
excited.
No one's getting on to anyone. Why am I always the dickhead for doing the right thing?
Because you're
You're
always
the
the dick.
dad.
Oh, damn.
No, DJ, what are you saying? Leave this in.
Yeah.
Leave it in. What are you
Ripping.
saying, DJ? Leave it in, Mark.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Gravy Baby.
Gravy
We got some,
bitches. Gravy
gravy bitches.
bitches. Stinking bitches.
I
Gravy
feel like we're
bitches.
going heavy on the bitches today.
Because y'all are being little bitches, by the way.
Oh.
We've ungendered that word amongst ourselves, right?
Not problematic anymore.
Jacob
never
Lush, you're not
thought
on
of
yet.
it.
Relax. Good one. You're one guy from Alabama.
What a way to bring our guest in.
Well,
Jacob Morrison, that's first question. Fuck labor and all the stuff you want to talk about. Have we ungendered bitches yet? I think plural we have. Bitch is still offensive. You cannot call a woman a bitch, but you can call a group bitches. And I know this because I get away with it all the time and women don't care. I think bitches is fine. Bitch sucks. What do you think, Jacob Morrison?
I think my official position is that it's all fine. We can just say whatever we want.
Hell yeah.
Right, you just deal with
gotta
the
live with the
consequences. Yeah, exactly.
If I'm ever in a debate with fucking like JD Vance or something, you ain't gonna hear nothing but slurs coming out of my mouth.
What's funny about that?
If you catch a stray, I
Tactical
hope you know where I stand.
But what's funny about that is if that happened, you'd get in more trouble than I will if I ever see him again, and I'll choke him to death. And then people will be like, the murderer is a hero, and the guy who did bad words should be roasted. Okay, Jacob, what's up, dude? How are you? You're coming to us live from Alabama. What's going on there? How are you today in Huntsville? Are you in Huntsville or outside of it?
I am. I'm in Huntsville, born and raised, never lived anywhere but here.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, especially for Huntsville, it's pretty rare. Like people always, anytime that I meet somebody in Huntsville, they ask me if I'm from Huntsville. And I say yes, and they mean, but like really from Huntsville, like where yes, I graduated high school here, I graduated college here.
It's just nice to know they're asking that of white people in Alabama too. That actually is good for my heart to know they're not just doing that to people with Carmen skin and darker. But where are you really from?
It's probably in part because my accent is not super thick. When I talk to people outside of the South, a lot of times they can identify me as a Southerner, but it's definitely much less thick than my dad. And I think in part because my dad was, something a little bit self-conscious about how thick his drawl was. And so he always really impressed upon me when I was young, like enunciate, speak well, don't talk like me. Otherwise people will think you're stupid, which is really sad and kind of fucking bullshit. But
my dad did the same thing with me, but then he named me Carmen, and I was like, well, I think the name's gonna give away more than how I talk, dog. I mean, he was always like, don't try not to, because he has an accent too. So he was just like, this country is racist, don't speak with an accent. And I was like, okay, well, you name me Carmen. That's gonna be the first thing they see before I even start talking.
That's so funny, dude.
So look at that common ground already.
Common ground between immigrants to the United States and Southerners within the United States. I mean, there's probably is putting it a bit too strongly to say bigotry against Southerners, but there's something there that like people kind of
we got a line
associated synonymously with stupid. Yeah, that's fucking terrible.
Yeah. We are in fact all a little racist. Yeah, definitely in both groups. It's weird we don't get along. No.
That was about, I guess, how cool Jacob is and what Jacob does too, just to give him a little context.
Well, I was about to.
Oh, good. I love that about you. Thanks, Daddy Drew.
I'm gonna jump out of this window. I wish they could have heard how mean y'all were being to me before we got on. They called me slurs. That's why DJ said that about JD.
We were recording when that happened. I suppose you just put that in there.
I'll put it out
on Patreon.
I'm a big fan of putting it out. Yeah, what do you
Yeah.
do? What's your organization? Go ahead.
Yeah. I wear a lot of hats, and it can kind of get a little bit confusing. And that is one of the problems with being a person who's active and kind of cares a little bit about the state of the world in Huntsville or in the South, really, because there are so few people who kind of are, willing to do the same kinds of things as you. And so you end up wearing a lot of hats. But I'm the president of the Labor Council, the North Alabama Area Labor Council. That is the regional federation of unions. So we've got 12 affiliates, and our affiliates represent literally, and I love saying this, everybody from rocket scientists at NASA to grocery store clerks at the commissary on the Arsenal, to laborers on construction sites, iron workers, engineers. It's just letter carriers, postal workers. And so a huge range of people. And, I have
workers.
Yeah,
The man
yeah.
is for fucking all workers and workers' rights.
So, president of the Labor Council, I have a union radio program that I do as well called the Valley Labor Report. We are on 5 radio stations across the South, which is really exciting. 2 of those are conservative talk radio stations, which I love. And we're on a black station, a community station, a sports station. And then we also, release it online and stuff as well. So those are the 2 primary hats that people will know me by.
And I guess when we met, you were kind of wearing both of those at Strike Fest. You were putting out the report, doing the live show. I think you were doing it live while we were there. Am I mistaken, or were you pre-recording? And then, so we met at Strike Fest. Folks who've been listening a while remember when DJ and I went down with a lot of folks, but we performed with Lee Baines, Mike Cooley of the Drive-By Truckers. We did comedy. Wesley, our boy Wesley, did comedy. That was when DJ met all the miners, and they fell in love immediately. I've told them here before, but I don't know if you know.
Minors, not minors. I'd like to
That's
clarify.
right.
We're in a post.
Yep, that's right. And to be fair, miners like DJ too, but in an appropriate way. My son loves him, dude. Fucking loves him. DJ got out of the car and saluted him, and his whole face lit up. He was like, "Now here's a guy who gets it." But Jacob, you'll love this. I've told it on here, I think, before, but I went to New York. I happened to be able to be there when I don't think you were there, but when the miners were up in New York, marching against the owners of their mine, whose headquarters are, of course, in fucking Manhattan, while they're pretending to be these down-home guys who are just trying to bring jobs to Alabama. And literally, I was like, "What's up, guys? Hey, dude, where the fuck's DJ?" Like, it was like, where is our boy, dude? But anyway, so you're head to toe legit. You've been doing all that for a while. What is going on in your world now? Just like, we'll bring folks in broadly, but specifically, what are you dealing with?
Yeah, well, I suppose that's the segue for me to talk about the most recent kind of political incident in Huntsville. That's the Huntsville Hospital, which owns the majority of healthcare providers north of Birmingham. It's huge. Is trying to buy its only competition in the Huntsville metro area. That's Crestwood Medical Center. And it's a $450 million acquisition. Another one of the things that's really kind of sus about this, you could say, is that back in August, they told the media that they had no plans to expand. And then literally 3 or 4 months later in January, they say, "Oh, well, we're actually buying our only competition, and we're going to own 100% of healthcare services in Huntsville now." And I've every time I've talked about it, I've said, I've done the caveat, I'm not a big fancy business boy. I don't know, but it seems like making a $500 million decision is something that takes more than like 12 weeks. So the willingness of the CEO to just lie to people to keep this under wraps is something concerning to me. And nationwide, there's been a trend that happens when healthcare is consolidated in a region, and that is that prices tend to increase. Not always, but they tend to increase. Care quality tends to suffer because of the lack of competition, and wages and working conditions for the people within the health system tend to deteriorate. And so we have, the Labor Council, because, the direct touch point for our members is that we get healthcare from Huntsville Hospital, right? I was born in Huntsville Hospital. The last surgery that I got was at Huntsville Hospital. This is all, we have a really direct connection here. And so we raise these concerns with Huntsville Hospital and with the city council, which appoints most of the board. And the hospital has responded in a way that has not been satisfactory. And they have made no commitments to not raise prices. They've made no commitments to keep things the same for workers. They've made no commitments on care quality or anything like that. And so our members have really been dissatisfied. And so our Labor Council's taking the initiative with another community organization, United Women of Color in Huntsville, to host a town hall on Friday, March 6th at 6 p.m., where we're going to be giving the public an opportunity that the hospital is trying to keep from them, that the city council is not providing them, an opportunity to give their input on this huge thing that's going to be happening to them and impacting them for years to come if it goes through. And we're going to be compiling that into a report that we will release to the board, to the city council, demanding that people's concerns be addressed.
Yeah, and if anyone's listening that's anywhere close to there, or you're concerned with it, or that hospital is your hospital, and I know we got a lot of listeners in the South, and you want to go to that, obviously do it. Follow Jacob and the Valley Labor Report online. But I also want to, Jacob, and I want you to talk about that specific thing as much as you want, but use it as if you don't mind, let's connect this to people everywhere listening. We have been harping for a while to our listeners, and I believe this, and I think you probably do too, that it'd be nice to vote for a Bernie Sanders and then 97 things go right. But A, he lost, but B, also you've got to engage where you're at. Speak to that broadly, if you don't mind. What got you into this? Was it labor first, and then now you're talking to people about their health care?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think I can connect that thread, I think. And I don't think I said the location. Campus 805 in the AV room, Friday, March 6th, 6 p.m. And you can find the Labor Council on Facebook, North Alabama Area Labor Council, and you can find the RSVP there. And, just on the political situation, there are people whose job it is to oversee this. The city council has some oversight role. I mean, they appoint the board, right? The majority of the board, who are the ones making these decisions. There's a little bit of complications in there with respect to the amount of power the city council has, but that is worth knowing. And the city council has so far not said anything about this, which I think is not acceptable. The Alabama Attorney General has the ability to bring a lawsuit against Huntsville Hospital for violating antitrust laws or something like that, to try to protect people from this potential monopoly. The Federal Trade Commission has the authority to oversee this, and the FTC in the past has actually tried to stop hospital mergers. I'm not sure if they've been successful before, but they've been concerned about the same things that I brought up. But unfortunately, we're going to try to raise the salience of this issue, and we're going to try to put pressure on authorities where we can. But I think the real where the rub is going to hit the road, if it does, is going to be at the action of workers within Crestwood or Huntsville Hospital. Because I do not really have confidence in the city council, the FTC, the attorney general. I do have confidence in the workers, and they're the ones that make it run. If the workers at Huntsville Hospital said, we do not want there to be a monopoly, or maybe we're fine with you buying Crestwood, but you have to actually match the wages of Huntsville Hospital workers to Crestwood workers, right? Right now, Crestwood workers make more. You have to match our wages and commit to keeping them the same, or doing something like that. You have to commit to this level of care quality. You have to make these commitments. If workers decided to do that they would have to do that. I mean, and so organization of working people, through unions, I think, is the primary vehicle, is a way to sidestep the lackluster quality of so many of our leadership institutions. And nurses across the country are doing that, primarily through SEIU, Service Employees International Union, or National Nurses United. They are organizing workers, and they just organized a hospital in Texas, won the union election overwhelmingly, and they're rallying for a fair contract now. There are hospitals across Appalachia that just negotiated a new contract that increases wages, provides for safe staffing ratios. That's been something the NNU has been really concerned about, is trying to bring staffing ratios down. And they've been doing this without the government, right? It's just the workers who are saying, we demand this, or ultimately the leverage is, maybe we go on strike and you don't have any nurses in the hospital, or you have to hire travel nurses for 3 or 4 or 5 times the cost of us. And, that's ultimately that would get Huntsville Hospital's attention. And that is something that I've been trying to communicate to people within the system, within Huntsville Hospital this whole time, is that, we're going to do everything that we can to try to bring this to other people and authorities who should be supporting workers and defending the community. But ultimately, the real power is in your hands, and it's kind of your decision. If the nurses in Huntsville Hospital don't decide not to do anything, then probably nothing is going to happen. And that's kind of the conclusion that I came to almost 10 years ago now, when I decided to really throw my life into doing what I can to build a labor movement in the South. Because I saw, so many, I was politicized in 2016, like so many people my age. I voted for Bernie Sanders. I loved Bernie Sanders. And I think that a criticism of him as a sheepdog into the Democratic Party is too much, right? I think that's like not really what's going on. But it happened a little bit to me, because I voted for Bernie Sanders, and I was like, I got the fire in my belly. I want to change the world. I want to make the world better. I'm going to go knock on doors for Democrats. And I kind of, after 2018, I was like, I did not make anybody's life better. I knocked on 1,000 doors. None of these people won. And what was I doing with 2 years? And so about that time, I got a job that happened to have a union. And so I joined the union. I thought that was the right thing to do. And I started reading about unions, and I started reading about the history of the labor movement and how working people have been able to change things and make their lives better themselves, by trusting each other and building unions and organizations and fighting the boss and fighting politicians and winning. And so, I became really quickly convinced that the key to broader social change, to making the world a better place, is by building strong unions. And, all along the way, as you're doing these things to try to, ultimately, you got a broader vision, but all along the way, you're filing grievances and you're getting somebody their job back. You're getting somebody back pay. You're fighting the boss and you're winning, and you're building that confidence and you're building community. And so, I think the labor movement and unions are really a unique, bright spot in the American social landscape. And, there are a lot of problems with them, obviously. There are people that have problems with me within the labor movement. But I'm still so inspired by what the movement is and can be.
Hell yeah.
Out of curiosity, how would you take that inspiration that you have and encourage other workers to realize the power that they have within an organization that they're constantly being beaten down or being fearful that they won't have, like in the grand scheme of things? I mean, this goes all the way up to Congress. Jasmine Crockett's constantly like, oh, how can you own where you get the prescriptions and the insurance and the doc? How can you own all of those things and then be like, oh, we don't own everything? Seeing how powerful they completely are. How do you empower workers to realize that they are the ones who literally, they have no fucking empire if you are not there to heal the sick and to peddle their drugs and to do all of this shit?
I think that history is a really powerful weapon, and I think that that sharing the wins and even the losses of working people contemporaneously can be inspiring, done the right way. I know that it inspired, like when I was, I'm still a member of AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, but long story short, I'm kind of doing like independent, research and consulting and advocacy and stuff now. So I'm not working for the government anymore. But when I was, I was so inspired by the fact that there were other workers within the Corps of Engineers who were able to get like advanced parental leave for some of their members because they all came together and they were like, yo, like our coworker's super fucking pregnant and she needs some time off. And it's crazy that you're denying her like another week, and not even another week, but it was like, we want to move the parental leave up a week. She's going to give birth next week, but she's having a lot of problems and she should be able to go ahead and access this now. And the supervisor was like, nah, we don't want to do that. And so all of her coworkers got together. They marched on the boss. They delivered a petition that everybody in her bargaining unit signed. And they were like, dude, this is, to the supervisor, this is fucked. Just let her go on parental leave. And the supervisor caved. And he was like, okay, well, I can't have and that's
Everybody's going to be mad at me.
right. And that's not even, they didn't change the world, but they made her life significantly better, and they built community while doing it. And so and that's what we try to do on the show every week is and this week we're going to be talking to a letter carrier about how he has been able to get, you can tune in, I guess, this Saturday and get the exact number, but I think it's $250,000 or something for letter carriers in Huntsville because the supervisors have been violating the contract and like working people longer than they're supposed to. I don't have all the details, but the supervisor was violating the contract, and the steward has been able to get like $250,000 for, I think, 50 or 60 letter carriers in Huntsville. And that's so cool, like being able to extract that from the boss and beat them and give real material benefits to working people here. And then, the history because I am convicted of the fact that, there are 16 million union members across the country. That is, there are so many people every single day, I believe in the South, but obviously across the country. Somewhere, some union steward, some rank and file union member is putting the boss in their place. Every single day, they are standing up for their coworkers and winning. Sometimes they're losing, but they're building power along the way. And that's so cool. And so there are so many stories like that, and there are stories throughout history. Even and especially in Alabama that are really inspiring. The coal miners. The coal miners union in Alabama is super inspiring. They were, one of my favorite, and it kind of mixes politics and labor. One of my favorite stories to tell is about Jim Folsom. He was the governor of Alabama right before George Wallace. Everybody knows George Wallace. Everybody knows he was super racist and really, really bad. But the governor right before him was basically pro-integration, and he was elected in a landslide. And the only reason that George Wallace succeeded him is because Alabama governors could not serve 2 terms in a row. Right? And so he was like term limited out. And I think probably he could have beaten George Wallace. And he's a guy that like had whiskey with black people in the governor's mansion in Alabama in the 50s, and he was elected on with the support of the labor movement. And with the labor movement support, particularly the mine workers and the steel workers, they passed the most progressive black lung legislation in the country. They like led the country in it. And, there was nowhere else for years that offered as comprehensive workman's comp and particularly black lung benefits to coal miners than Alabama. And actually, there's a book. I mentioned that I've got a bunch of books here. There's a book called The Southern Key that's super good. People should read it. Class, Race, and Radicalism in the 1930s and 40s. It's got a whole chapter called Alabama Exceptionalism, which is, I love that. It makes me beam with pride. But talks about how Alabama has always had, and still has actually to this day, the highest union density rate of any state in the Deep South. And back in the 50s and 60s, 1 in every 4 working people in Alabama were members of unions. And those unions were able to do a lot for their members and for their communities. You know, obviously it was the 50s and 60s in Alabama and the 40s. You know, I don't want to be kind of rose-tinted glasses about it. There was a lot of problems, but there was also a lot of really inspiring things. Particularly, one of my favorite stories about the UMWA with respect to the race question is in 1901. It's worth saying prior to this that the UMWA and miners in Alabama have always organized interracially, right? You can't say that about the steelworkers. The steelworkers had black and white unions for a time. The miners never did. They always organized interracially. And in 1901, right after the fall of Reconstruction, right after the Redeemers got into office, and the same year that the legislature rewrote the state constitution to disenfranchise black people and begin constructing Jim Crow, the Birmingham Labor Council was about to institute segregationist policies and say black people can't come in the union halls anymore. And the miners' union, which was affiliated with the Birmingham Labor Council, was like, bro, well, like 50% of our members are black. You can't do that or we'll disaffiliate. And the Birmingham Labor Council never segregated their union halls because of the mine workers standing up 1901, the same year that everybody else was in this huge racial fury and was like, oh, we're super scared of black people. The KKK was gaining members. The UMWA was like, those are our members. And if they can't come, none of us are coming.
I love it. I love that the miners were like, all our lungs are black, so we're not even fucking, this isn't a race issue for us, okay?
Everybody was black down there. It's about...
I didn't know that. I didn't know
Everybody's black down here, but baby.
I've got 2 books about the history of the coal miners union in Alabama. This one is from 1878 to 1921, The Challenge of Interracial Unionism. And then this one, it like basically picks up in the 1920s and goes through the 90s. And it even talks about how the UMWA was picketing some ships that were taking Alabama coal to, or maybe it was bringing South African coal to Alabama. They were basically protesting apartheid in the 90s. The Alabama coal miners doing that.
We're rad.
Yeah,
that's rad. It's so rad you got 2 books about how great Alabama is, and they don't mention football. That's crazy, dude.
Roll Tide.
I've got more books than that about how great Alabama is, but none of them mention football, actually.
None of them have football. That's wild.
None of them have football. No.
Man, I have so many questions and so many things to say. But what? This is a kind of like a personal thing, I guess, or not really, but I wonder. So I listen to the show, like when I'm at work on Saturdays, like I'll turn it on in the background, and it's really rad listening, finding out about Volkswagen and Chattanooga and stuff. It was a super cool interview. You guys really do some great work. I'm not just glazing you. I'm saying I really do appreciate what you're doing in Minnesota with the general strikes. It was a great job. Your Right to Work segment was fantastic, and I've actually used that. I'm in a right to work state, and I think you guys do a lot of work. I would consider I would consider the show to be leftist, but I also like I'm a lurker. I'm not really a commenter, but I'm a lurker of comments. You know what I'm saying? And I do see that you have, like, you're saying you're on conservative radio and you have conservative listeners who do agree with you. I mean, I've seen from like, I've seen about the same amount, like when you guys were talking about the railroads and Biden and stuff back then. And it's like, it doesn't seem partisan, even though I would say that you're a leftist. Anyways, have you noticed any less partisanship, I guess, I suppose, or politicization? Have you seen more, because you're very worker focused? I would say that. I would say, like, because you are worker focused and it is union focused and it's not politically focused. I mean, you guys, if you do something, it's usually because it has to do with a union. You know what I'm saying, or workers. It's not like just hey, we're bringing this up. Like, for instance, when the guy called Trump a pedophile or whatever, said "fuck off." You guys did a segment about that, but it had to do with the workers and the union and the car union and stuff like. But have you noticed any less bipartisanship, or has it always kind of been that way in the union and that in the labor field?
Good. So I'll start by saying that you're right about, I mean, our politics, and we don't hide them, right? I mean,
Right.
One of our back from break kind of hits is labor creates all wealth, and all wealth should go to labor, right? So, I mean, we don't hide the ball, but
Yeah.
we definitely, I mean, most of our interviews are workers and talking about what's going on in their unions, and so it's really easy for people to kind of listen to us. I hope and I feel, and we try to make it this way, if they don't agree with us politically 100% of the time. And is there less bipartisanship in the labor movement now? Is that the question? Like are unions lining up behind the Democrats more or less? Or
Well, I mean, I don't mean even Democrats or Republicans. I mean, like, does it seem to you? Because as an outside observer, I have seen more people talk about labor in a way that didn't have to do with Democrat or Republican or this or that recently.
Right.
This is just recent.
The way you guys are talking about labor, it's less politicizing it to the point where, I mean, I think if you take a lot of the red blue tape off of everything, a lot of times you would get people who would be politically opposed to be on the same place, because at the end of the day, this is all classism. This is all rich people exploiting poor people. There is a huge fucking common ground that these people don't seem to realize. And I think if you take all of the politicization, if you take the politics out of it, it's more clear and it's more easy to realize the common ground. And I think what DJ is trying to say is what you're doing seems to be doing that, but do you still see a lot of the political infighting that's happening, or is there really a common ground that's happening? Is that right,
Carmen.
DJ? Is it?
Yes, that's
I was like,
Thank you very
cool.
much.
For sure. I was like, I think I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some of it. Unfortunately, radio and even podcasting is, to a certain extent, like a more passive sort of thing than I would like it to be. I would really like if more people in our audience, than just, we've got like 3 or 4 regular callers, and we just don't hear from very many other people than them. And so I really would like to have more audience feedback so that I could get a better feel for kind of how people are, what's going on the ground, so to speak.
Mm.
And so it's, I do think it's difficult for me to get as much of a feel for that as I would like to be able to speak confidently about it. But I mean, I do, my parents are kind of my sort of connection, I guess, to the normie conservatives, right? And it's not a super great connection because my parents are very, very weird. They're Pentecostal, for people who like their holiness specifically, Pentecostal for anybody not in North Alabama. And so they're super weird, but I mean, they're concerned. They're like,
right.
They don't understand what the administration is doing. They don't understand why they're doing it. And, on the economic stuff specifically, I can pretty well kind of get them on the same page about a lot of stuff. But the social issues really kind of drive their political thinking or whatever. But I do think that more and more people are coming around on, there has to be some sort of reorienting of the balance of power in society. And I think that there's an attempt by by Republicans and Democrats, frankly, to try to cynically grab on to that feeling of being taken advantage of and the necessity of populism. And, I think that it's going to be on working people to kind of be vigilant for, whoever is trying to kind of carry that label, to make sure that they're being real about it, and that they're not going to just kind of, say populism on the campaign trail, and then when they get in office, pass another big tax cut or, things.
It's been wild to see like the abundance movement try to pull itself to be like, obviously, trade union, anti like all this, and like still wear a facade of like, hey, we're like, I don't even know what they're doing. It's such a weird thing that like, but you're right. They both wear the cape, but like neither of them have any type of commitment to economic rights for workers or anything of that nature. And it's wild to see themselves tie themselves up in pretzels. But I have noticed like a class consciousness growing in the spaces that I'm in, which has been really nice for me personally. But this is just in conversation and stuff. I don't know how it works. But what do you think, looking at history, like I've had people ask me questions. I mean, whenever I talk about labor or workers or anything of that nature, people always want to bring up like Blair Mountain and stuff. And I'm like, well, that was after World War I. And, I'm saying those conditions were kind of, very exceptionally bad. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But it seems like we're kind of getting back there. It's kind of scary. Do you know what I'm saying? Historically, and you're talking about like what are the good and what are the bad, what would you say would be the pivotal moments pivotal moments in where workers have really gained a success and where they have really failed?
Okay. I mean, I think the auto industry is a really great sort, you can kind of track the ascendance and the decline of the broader labor movement by tracking the history of the United Auto Workers. And the founding of the auto workers, is not quite as militant and violent as Blair Mountain and stuff like that.
Sure.
But there's some of that for sure. I mean, there was a book that was written by the secretary of the union at the time, who was part of the Flint sit-down strike, Henry Krause, The Many and the Few. And it's basically a compilation of all of his kind of reports from within the sit-down strike at the GM factory in Flint. And it's such a cool story. Somebody should make it into a movie. It's unironically like a spy thriller sort of deal, because the unions had to operate much more kind of clandestinely than they do now. And so there's stories of that actually happened of the union leadership trying to weed out what they called stool pigeons, people who were there for the boss and spying on the union and stuff. And so they told everybody, and including the stool pigeons, about a plan that they were going to do to take over this other plant while they were, they had already occupied one plant, and they're like, we need to expand the occupation. We got to take over another one. And so they told everybody about this plan to take over like a different plant than the one that they actually were going to do. And so then they brought in the secret people who were like, actually, this is what we're really going to do, and this is how we're going to do it. And that worked. And the company like super guarded the plant that they thought the UAW was going to occupy, and left the one that that was really the target totally unguarded, and they just took it over super easy and occupied another plant. And that was a big way that they were able to win the Flint sit-down strike and get GM to recognize the UAW, start negotiations. And from there, workers are able to go from working in the auto industry as an itinerant, almost gig work, right? I mean, it was because the turnover was so high. It's like an it's like an Amazon warehouse today. The turnover so high in these facilities and these factories, they were able to turn it into a real good-paying job with 100% employer-provided health care, with high wages, with a pension, and they, it just kept getting better and better, and they were able to turn that into political power that they were able to use to support the New Deal, which, I mean, in the South created the TVA, which is one of the best things that's ever happened to people in this region. People who get power from the TVA in Tennessee and North Alabama and a few other states, we pay literally some of the lowest costs for electricity in anywhere in the country. Some of the most reliable energy, and it's also the cleanest energy because the TVA, because it's owned by the government, was able to make longer term investments in nuclear and hydro without, I want to make sure that I make short term quarterly profits or whatever. And so, the TVA actually has some of the cleanest, least carbon emissions of any utility in the country, any big utility in the country. It's super cool. And so the UAW was able to build power for their workers in the industry, to extract more of the value that their members created from the bosses in the auto industry. They were able to parlay that into political power and get gains for broader working people. I mean, and Social Security and Medicare would not have been possible without the labor movement. But then you see I think it's the Treaty of Detroit is the name of what happened. And I can't remember the year. I think it's 1958 or the 60s sometime. And the UAW was pushing at that time, not just, and the labor movement, there's always been a strain within the labor movement that has been unsatisfied with just extracting more of the value that we create. We need, and I would count myself among this kind of tradition within the labor movement, we need control of industries. We need ownership. And if we don't have control and ownership of the industries, then we are always going to be at the whim of the boss in some ultimate sense. And they just frankly don't deserve that level of power and control over the lives of not just working people in those industries, but people all over the country. And so the UAW, as it's kind of notching these wins and notching these wins and notching these wins, there's a strain there that's always talking about taking over the industry. If not outright control of GM and Ford and Chrysler by the UAW, then getting, more and more board seats, getting, 50% of the board being workers rather than just shareholders, stuff like that. And in the Treaty of Detroit, the UAW officially stopped pursuing that. They said, basically, as long as the money coming into the pockets of our members increases by wages, by health insurance, or by the pension, then we'll leave the ownership question alone. And you can just keep it. You can keep the enterprise. And I think, and it's not, it's not a coincidence that this happens after the Red Scare, where all of the Reds are put out of the unions, including the UAW. There was a huge herd of left-wingers, socialists, who spent their lives and built these unions. I mean, if you look at the people who founded the UAW in Flint, Michigan, at the GM sit-down strike, you look at basically all of them, and they were all members of some socialist party or another. And and there were a lot of them that were kicked out. There were individual left-wingers who were kicked out of unions, and there were unions that were dominated by left-wingers because the members elected left-wingers that were kicked out of the AFL-CIO. You look at the ILWU, which is at one of the only unions that was kicked out of the AFL-CIO during the Red Scare that has survived in any real sense. But the longshoremen on the West Coast, they were kicked out of the AFL-CIO because they were too communist, allegedly. the UE, the United Electrical Workers, which now represents something like 70,000 grad workers across the country. I mean, it's a huge turnaround for the union. They were really on the path to kind of decline and death as recently as 7 years ago. I think 7 years ago they only had 10,000 members or something, but they've really turned it around by representing a lot of graduate workers, which is really cool. But the UE was kicked out, and they represented basically every worker at GE. And then after they were kicked out, the non-communist unions raided all of their membership and destroyed the UE. And so, you have left-wing unions kicked out. You have left-wing individuals kicked out of more establishment unions. And I really think the lifeblood of the labor movement was kind of pulled out. And you have people that are in many cases, just kind of frankly less committed, and you have people that are not as willing to experiment. People who are less willing to go farther. And it becomes.
Do you think they just got scared by the big C? They got scared by the idea of communism, which is so disheartening, because there are plenty of companies who have done this and it has worked, where the company is owned by its workers. I mean, Red Mill is one that's always thrown around. I mean, there's a fuck ton of them where the company's still thriving. It just happens to be that everybody that works for the company is also thriving. It's not just one rich cunt at the end, And so I don't understand what is the scariness that you don't have. Is it the power, do you think? Is that all it is? Or is it just that you inherently feel that you have to be richer than everybody else?
I mean, as far as the bosses, the scare of the C word or quote unquote socialism or worker ownership is definitely that if you are simply the manager of a worker-owned enterprise, then you are not going to be able to have as much power over them, certainly. And that's a big thing that people really don't recognize, because I mean, a lot of these companies spend literally millions of dollars on anti-union consultants and anti-union campaigns. And for some of these companies, it is actually, they spend more money fighting the union than they would have to give up if they just recognized their workers' union and bargained in good faith and gave them a fair contract. I mean, you really see that.
So it's not even the money then. So it's just the power.
That for some of them, I think that the power is a huge part of it. But on the workers' side, why did workers go along with this, right? Why did the unions go along? It sounds crazy, but in their defense, when Taft-Hartley, I think it was Taft-Hartley, was passed, it contained a provision that banned communists from leadership in the labor movement. Ultimately, that provision was struck because it violates the First Amendment, obviously. There was real concern that if the AFL-CIO did not kick out the communists, and if individual unions did not kick out individual communists, that the government was going to come in and destroy the union and take away everything. And so, it's not like there wasn't a real question about what to do there. I think that people may say the wrong choice, but I mean,
the fascists are always going to do that. And I mean, that's easy for me to say sitting here. I know that. I'm not trying to judge someone trying to feed 4 people, in 1962. But what from the beginning of our talk today with you to now, the through line I'm seeing, like, I really, really hope that the people working for the hospital internalize and understand the power that they have, and then let that knowledge carry them through them doing what they want to do collectively. And I hope people who've been listening to you today, and thank you so much, by the way, because it's been phenomenal. I hope there are people listening right now who, like, sometimes people glaze over with history. Sometimes people glaze over with all these acronyms. Sometimes people glaze over. It's like, okay, I'm not a miner. I'm not a nurse. I really, really, really pine for a day where people in America have the sort of collective consciousness and knowledge that it seems, for example, French workers do, where it's like just this realization that we can get some more of what we want by demanding it and then following through. You know, and then if the government's like, well, then we're going to destroy all the unions. Okay, and then what? Then who's going to make your shit? Who's going to be your nurse? Who's going to wipe your fucking dad's ass and deliver your babies? And maybe I'm ranting. I guess my question to you is like, does that come and go in waves when you study this historically, the sort of collective conscious of a society? Are we building towards one thing? You know, the question of the day is, how do we do that? But looking back in history, what's made it work? What's failed?
I mean, that's such a big question that people, you know, if there was
You have
one
3 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay,
I think the you know, the really unsatisfying answer is that if there was one silver bullet, I do think that the labor movement would have done it, and everybody would be a member of a union now, and we haven't done it yet, right? So unfortunately, I think the answer is that there's not one silver bullet, but there are. I mean, Jane McAlevey has really great books about, you know, as far as how do you do it, you know, workplace by workplace, how do you build a strong union among your coworkers. She's got some great books. She passed away just a year or two ago. I mean, the labor movement lost a lot when we lost Jane McAlevey, I think. But she's got some really good books about how to build an organizing committee and how to run a contract campaign in when you're negotiating with your employer. But you know, I mean, the big thing is just about, I mean, it's really building relationships and having conversations and doing that in a real strategic way. You know, I mean, you're never going to have more spreadsheets than you will as an organizer. You know, I mean, you need to track people. You need to track kind of what they're thinking about the union and their relationships too, right? And so, you know, just one quick little you know, piece of information that maybe will help somebody in a union campaign is, you know, it's really important to have in your campaign people on the organizing committee that represent the workplace, and not just in like the woke, you know, demographic. We need men and women and black and white and stuff. I mean, that's important. You know, it should. You know, if 50% of your workplace is black and you don't have any black people on the organizing committee, that is like a problem, you know, strategically. Not just, you know, it's good to represent the people, but strategically it poses a problem if the people looking at the folks who are supposed to represent them don't see themselves in the committee. So, but you should do it in that way, but also, and probably more importantly, departmentally. You know, if you are in a factory and everybody is coming from maintenance and you don't have any line workers in your bargaining committee or in your negotiating or your organizing committee, and you're trying to build a union, you know, I mean, why are the line workers going to join a union that's being run completely by maintenance workers? You know, you need to have people that represent, you know, all of the places and all the departments in the plant, and you need to be tracking like relationships in a way that, you know, who are the natural leaders in the plant, right? Because that's and I think there's a parallel to historically how do unions build power historically, and how do you do it on a small basis? You know, I think that you bring in the social leaders. So, you know, you think about if you're trying to organize your workplace, who is the person that everybody goes to when there's a problem, right? Not, you know, when you think about the leader, that's the question that you want to ask.
General worker in hot Cheetos pajamas.
Yes. Yeah, right. And so, you know, if you're at a Dollar General, yeah, who do you go to when there's a problem? And, you know, anybody that's like not a boss in that, you know, sometimes maybe you will go to your boss, and obviously you can't talk to them about your organizing, but you you know, you gotta think about who has respect of people. And if you can get them on board with the union campaign, then they will bring kind of their followers along. And that's actually kind of how Starbucks got kicked off. One of the people who started there, started working there actually with the intention organizing a union, but it wasn't her that made the difference. She was able to get a person who had been working at Starbucks for like 13 years and had a whole lot of respect among not only her coworkers but management. You know, she had conversations with her and she talked about unions with this person, and she was like, okay, I'm in. And then they won their union election, and then by them leading the way, now there are 12,000 unionized baristas at 600 union Starbucks stores across the country. That's huge. And I think that, you know, I think it does kind of come in waves, and I hope that we're coming up on an opportunity to take advantage of a wave moment in the labor movement now. I mean, unions have literally never had a higher approval rating. More people approve of unions now than ever. There are, you know, people trust unions in a way that's pretty unprecedented, but there are still so few people that are actually members of unions. And so, you know,
why isn't there a labor party? Why don't we have a labor party in America?
I mean, I think that
This time, not a joke. You literally have 3 minutes. Go.
Yeah, right. Well, we can do that another time. We can talk about that.
We can do it on the Patreon, which we need to tease in a
Yeah,
moment. But hold on, give us the 3-minute answer. I think he can do a bullet point.
yeah, there, you know, I mean, it's just really hard in a two-party
I don't
system.
think the money and the power would allow it. At the end of the day, I don't think they.
I think that's
I think
that's
they
a
would
big
make it so
problem.
difficult, you know, on the bureaucracy end, it would never get done. I mean, I think people have tried. I mean, and just think about any independent party trying to make any kind of headway.
I think that, yeah, I think that's a problem. There's a friend of mine, David Griscom, recently wrote a book that just came out. You can buy it, The Myth of Red Texas, that talks about the history of populism and socialism in Texas. And at one point, actually, the Texas Socialist Party was not a third party. It was the second party behind the Dixiecrats. So the number one vote getters were the Democrats, who were not the same as the Democrats today. I mean, you know, they were the Dixiecrats. And then the number two vote getters were the Texas Socialist Party. And then third were the Republicans. So, you know, but then, you know, they did literally immediately following two elections where that was the outcome, they violently repressed and killed socialist leaders and shut down their papers. And, you know, I mean, so I mean, that's one reason that it hasn't happened is, you know, the American capitalists are uniquely violent. I think you can compare it to European capitalists. They have been in the past uniquely violent. There was an interesting
Dude, I just feel like there's one redneck listening. So it literally is because Europe's gay. That's crazy, dude.
I think it may be part of it. But there was an interesting project in 1996 to start a labor party, actually, that my union was a part of, AFGE, along with a bunch of other unions. And, you know, it never got off the ground and that's in a much more modern context. And, you know, there's just so much concern about kind of playing the spoiler and stuff like that. And you know, you can look at labor parties overseas, and I do wonder if the significance of a party being a quote unquote labor party is maybe a little bit overplayed, because you look at the Labor Party in the United Kingdom and Britain, and it's basically turned to the Democrat. Actually, in a lot of ways, they're worse than the
Basically, what?
Democrats.
Oh shit.
Literally was founded by unions and by the working class, and unions have like governing authority, or had governing authority in the Labor Party, and then ultimately they kind of lost that power, and you know, now it's basically, you know, these like neoliberal people like wearing the skin suit of you know, labor. So
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we appreciate you. Plug your stuff real quick. I know that and on top of the hats that you wear, there's a hat in there somewhere where you have a podcast where people can hear more and connect with you.
That's right. We're TVLR.fm is our website. You can subscribe to our newsletter there. We have a couple of newsletters. We have one we call Boss Watch, that we just look at the press releases from like the Department of Labor and the EEOC about how bosses who were stealing from their workers, or who killed their workers, or who discriminated or sexually harassed their workers got caught. And so we profile that every week. And then last week in Southern Labor, where we take a look at all the union elections and contract campaigns and stuff going on in the South. Find us on YouTube at The Valley Labor Report, Facebook, TikTok, Twitch, all of those places. And yeah, tvlr.fm/donate if you want to help us stay on the air.
Hell yeah, dude. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you
Jacob
so much
Morrison.
for coming on, Jacob.
That was awesome.
If you want to hear more from old Jacob, we are going to do a Patreon episode. We're going to do it right now, record it over on our not Patreon. What is it called? Discord.
Patreon.com/
We're going to record it on our Discord.
Check it out.
We're going to put it on our Patreon. So there's going to be more going on there. So come check it out. Jacob, we appreciate the shit out of you. You can go for now. We'll send you another link in a minute, buddy. Carmen, you got anything to plug in the meantime? Thanks again, Jacob.
CarmenMorales.com for all of your Carmen Morales needs. I'll be in DC in April. I'll be in some town in Virginia at the end of March. Fredericksburg, Maryland, at the end of March. But again, CarmenMorales.com for all of your Carmen Morales needs.
Hell yeah. I will be part of the Toledo Street Comedy Festival down there in New Orleans with some of my good friends and enemies. And enemies. I'll be there Saturday and Sunday. That is March, I want to say 20th and 21st. The next weekend, I'll be in Denver at the Denver Underground Comedy Lounge. Quick warning about that. I am on all of the shows that weekend. My name is not on the ticket link. That's not how they do it. I see it as less pressure on me to sell tickets. You know, like whatever. Like I'm just closing out their showcase. They're paying me headliner money. Cool. Hell yeah. Because I was thinking about it. I was like, well, aside from the ego taking a hit, why do I care? And it turns out I don't. So I'm actually for this. The more I thought about it, I was like, this fucking rules. That's March 27th and 28th, whatever that Friday, Saturday is. There at the Denver Underground Comedy Lounge. Quick announcement. My Blue Ridge Comedy Club show was supposed to be April 18th and 19th. It's being moved to May. I'll get the dates from Sean. I got bumped because Dale Jones needed the weekend before he went back to California, and he is the man. And I'm going to be honest. I wouldn't admit this about many people. Way funnier than me. One of the funniest and kindest people alive. Go see Dale Jones. If you already got a ticket, I'm sure they'll work that out for you. I haven't put any of these dates up on my website, even the ones 2 weeks away, but I promised I will this weekend. Okay, that's it.
Thank you guys so much for listening.
Oh, nope. DJ Scott. No, you plug it.
I just said, that was all I was saying. Thanks for listening. Plug your stuff.
Nah. Let's go. Y'all know I was just gonna joke around.
But in a bit. All right. Bye.
Bye.
You could stick a whole ribeye in one of your back pockets. Like,